Hello, and just before you start today's review of this, the ioSafe 220, myself and Eddie at NAS Compares have a favour to ask of you. Eddie?
Yes, we want to smash this box up so we can make another video and show you what this box can withstand, what it can't.
Ultimately, it is a disaster-proof NAS, and ioSafe say that this can withstand all kinds of disasters, as they put it, and we've tested this in the past with other ioSafe solutions. Hopefully they're there on screen, and what we need from you is what we can do to mess this up. Eddie?
Exactly, we tried to cook it on a barbecue.
The previous ones, yeah.
Tried to throw it off the high shelf and staircases. We tried to...
froze it, we kicked it apart. Again,
over it.
We've done all kinds of stuff with it, but what we need from you is ways in which we can mess this up. But remember, we've got to keep them relative. So cooking it on a barbecue or starting a bonfire and cooking it, lovely stuff. We're not going to chuck it in a volcano. We don't mind throwing it off a high shelf, but we're not going to throw it off the Eiffel Tower. And ultimately, in the comments, can you go down there and suggest ways in which we can mess this up? If you're based in the UK and you've got a setup or tools, or maybe you work on a building site and you want to help us mess this thing up and prove ioSafe's kind of suggestion that this can withstand a disaster, then let us know in the comments. But otherwise, let's start today's video. Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about this, a very, very unique piece of kit. This is the ioSafe 220 Plus. It is a NAS that is based on Synology architecture and then massively supersized in a number of different ways. Do anyone watch that movie Batman? Batman 1989, and indeed Batman Returns if you're going to be a nerd about these things. But there is a bit in that movie where Batman's kind of walking away from the car and then he goes, shields. And it's one of my favourite bits because I'm a big old loser. That's kind of the philosophy with this, because this system is built on this. This is the Synology DS220 Plus. It arrived in summer 2022 and it weighs, unpopulated, about 1.3 kilos. This is, once again, the ioSafe 220. It weighs 13 kilos. And the reason for that is that this is a disaster-proof NAS. It's not the first time we've talked about disaster-proof NASs here on the channel. Indeed, we've looked at everything from the ioSafe 1019 to the ioSafe Hawk drive that we were desperately trying to destroy all those years ago. And in today's video, I want to talk about this system's architecture, what I like, what I don't like, and hopefully help you understand what exactly you're getting for your money. Now, as the intro to this video, which I hope we've put on the front there, will indicate for you, into this video we're not going to be doing any kind of major destruction. I will be doing some pretty horrific destruction on this device in the next few weeks just to see if it can live by its promise of being disaster proof. But in today's video we're going to look at the hardware, both internal and external, talk about what it can do and hopefully help you decide whether it's suitable for your business data, because there is no way this is geared towards a home user. You might be a home user with a little bit of cha-ching knocking around, but frankly, this is tremendous overkill in terms of destruction. And its level of protection that it presents is something I think a home user could do another way or another 5 ways to a less integral fashion. I'm not saying your data is not worth as much as a business's data, but the sheer scale of protection this thing affords is something that I think only a business user will ever need to really consider in the grand scheme of destruction. So, first and foremost, I would normally have a unit unboxed here on the table. I would show you the retail packaging, but first and foremost, it's pretty boring. It's a standard brown box because, again, this is a highly enterprise product. I will say that inside it was remarkably well protected. Much more protection on this than what was afforded to the original Synology cardboard packaging of the DS220 Plus. This has got a whole skeleton foam structure all the way through and it is covered all the way around. Now, on the front there, we've got that powered by Synology label. We've got information there on the top with regards to our data recovery services, something I'll touch on later on because yes, data recovery is included in this in some multifaceted ways. But let's talk about the accessories, what you get with this box. Now again, Every now and then, of course, I'm going to refer to this here, the 220 Plus, because there are comparisons to be made, which are good for the most part, with one particularly bad one that I'm sure you can almost anticipate there in the distance. So inside, we have our key, something we're going to talk about later on. Stick that on there. We have got our PSU there. It's an external 90 watt PSU, and again with extra core strength cabling, something we'll talk about, and it's a Synology PSU as well. There's also a Cat5e cable, but not a usual Cat5 cable. This is much thicker than the cables we've talked about previously. To put that into perspective, look at the thickness of this cable. This has clearly been designed to just last that extra bit longer. It's even like extra covered there at the top. To put that into perspective, this is a standard Synology cable there. Look at the size difference between them. Again, that's what you're going to find with this device. There's been attention drawn to different areas of protection and overall environmental running that most home users wouldn't have even noticed. So if you move away from the PSU, we've got our external power cables. There's an EU and a UK. And there's our quick start installation guide, which again leads you to information about installing DSM and setting it up for the first time. And the welcome information about how the system is put together, how to access the data, and how to access Synology's DSM software easily straight away. So those are our accessories. And again, there should be an article linked in the description. It goes to NAS Compare, so we've done all the photos and stuff with this, and we will come to that, back to that key in just a moment. I'll pop that down there. And what we want to do is take a close look at this without me breaking my shoulders. So now let's get the thumbnail sorted. This weighs a lot, as mentioned. I'm a very weak man. But as you can already tell looking at this, look how the front differs between them. Not only the panel that's chosen, but look at the design of it. It's very different. The first thing, which will not come as a surprise, is this thing is almost entirely metallic on the outside there. We've got LEDs there at the bottom for system operation. And if you look right there at the bottom, they've even included the USB port that's front mounted, which is a neat little touch. Again, this front panel, we will take a look inside in just a moment. There's not really ventilation on either side, largely because the whole idea of this device is that heat doesn't get in so easily. It's not so much about dissipation of heat in this device, it's more about stopping heat getting in, and moisture and smoke and detritus. On the base we have a tiny ventilation panel there, and that is for the CPU. If you get really close, you can just about make out the heat sink that covers the CPU inside that we'll talk about in just a moment. And if we have a look at the rear, we can look at the ports and connections. Now, as you can see, we've got that singular fan, and again, if we bring that side by side with the Synology here, you can see a very distinct difference. While I bring that down, I'm sorry I keep clinking the table. You can see the Synology DS220 has got that small plastic fan there, whereas the ioSafe there has got this incredibly rugged, metal-covered high assist fan. This is not going to be a quiet system when it's in operation there. At the bottom, we've got another USB port there. There's a USB 2 port on the front and a USB 3.2 Gen 1 port there, and that is a 5 gigabits per second connection. And we've got 2 gigabit LAN connections there. Normally at this point, I would rag on and complain that it's only 1 GBE, and indeed, in a business sense, 1 GBE is still a little disappointing in 2022, but you've got to remember that the architecture of this system is leaning heavily on this system in the way it was built, which was in 2020. So it's very hard to gauge it by 2022 standards in that regard. So if we leave that there with the backshine just for a moment, we can talk about some of that internal hardware. Now, I'm not going to strip this device down further than accessing the hard drive, something I'll show you in just a moment. The reason being that it would compromise a lot of the testing that we're going to do in other videos. But I can tell you right now, the CPU inside is an Intel Celeron, and it is the Celeron J4025. Again, the same CPU series that the Synology 20 Plus series generation were utilising. It's a dual-core 2.0 GHz processor that can be burst up to 2.9 GHz when it's needed, and it does have onboard 4K UHD graphics. On top of that, it arrives with DDR4 2666 MHz memory, and with 2 GB by default that could be upgraded to 6 GB, although I'm going to be very entertained to find out how the hell we upgrade it. I'm hoping we'll be able to see that when we open it up inside. Now, alongside those connections and that internal architecture of a CPU that is somewhat starting to show its age the tiniest bit, what you have in conjunction with that is, of course, Disk Station Manager, Synology DSM, currently in version DSM 7.1, which is what this system runs on. With that, you have an entire business package of application from the collaboration suite that handles all the different kinds of file types and more, Synology Drive, that's not only a one portal access point to all of your data, but also allows you live synchronization and shared team folders, be a lot more intelligent with file pinning and file streaming across multiple platforms there, with Mac OS on the horizon having all of those features too. Then you've got Synology Surveillance Platform that allows you to connect with multiple IP cameras in your home or business environment with 2 licenses included. In Surveillance Station 9, the latest variation of that software, is as good as it's ever been, with a multitude of different applications and services behind it. Alongside that, you've got Synology's email client applications there, along with multimedia suite in Audio Station, Audio Station, Synology Photos, and Video Station, as well as support third-party applications too. Alongside that, there's virtual machine support on this, as well as multi-tiered and multi-application backup services in Active Backup Suite, which also synchronizes with SaaS services like Office 365 and Google Workspace, but also Hyper Backup that allows you to create that perfect 3-2-1 backup strategy there, and live synchronization via cloud synchronization with existing cloud providers too. Alongside this, Synology is one of the few brands out there that has its own public cloud platform, not some higgity, sticking out their tiny little blob of storage online. This is a fully fledged, almost hyperscale and full synchronized cloud platform known as C2. Now, C2 has its own range of applications that extend to the existing apps, such as Surveillance C2 or C2 Surveillance, lots of C2 access and authentication applications there, and backup tools as well on their platform, although do bear in mind the C2 service does require a subscription payment there. But still, having that great combination of hybrid cloud bare metal combination along with all of those applications in first party form, and the slick kind of localized low latency desktop interface via the browser the DSM affords, is a big part of what makes this such a great device. Not only that you have got disaster-proof data, something we'll talk about in a moment, but also that the software packages and the abilities of the system are not compromised by that. This isn't just a hard drive you connect over the internet. It is so much more than that, and such a fully featured platform. I do recommend you check out my review of DSM 7 from around about a year ago. It's about an hour long, but it covers everything. So, let's talk a little bit about how this protects your data. While my table's being super squeaky because of the weight of this device here. Now, one of the main selling point, this disaster-proof nature of the device, comes in 3 different forms. The first form is it can withstand 1550 degrees Fahrenheit heat. That means that in a blazing fire, before the fire brigade turn up, this thing can withstand that peak heat for a sustained 30-minute period. Now, bear in mind, the odds of you having that heat, that sustained for 30 minutes, are actually surprisingly small. What it's going to be is a rising temperature. That is going to extend that lifespan. That is merely that 30 minutes at that temperature, the peak of what it can withstand, which is already astonishingly high. Alongside that, it can withstand up to 3 days under 10 feet of water, as well as dust protection and water kind of damage getting straight to it. IP68 rating, which is very rare in electronics. You see a lot of IP66 and IP67 protection from light dustings of water, light pressure, and just environmental air damage. This is sustained protection against actively kind of damaging forces that are normally associated against electronics. So imagine this thing's in the building building burns down. From that, the fire brigade come in, hoses everywhere, foam everywhere. You want to know that this can only withstand that heat, but it can also withstand water. And if there's floodings, tsunamis and more, this should be able to withstand those for an extended period of time, like the black box on a plane. Now, there's also inclusive data recovery services if you go for one of the models that's got hard drives included, which means if the system is in a giant fire, then falls through the floor, subject to flooding, and then during all of that there's shock and motion and shock damage, abrasion damage, then after that you can send the system off for forensic level data recovery. But I will come back to that data recovery later on in the video. But for now, let's get this off the front here and show you exactly what I mean by it being built that little bit different. So to gain access to the system, this is where our fun little key comes in, because here on the front we have to remove this airtight sealed front panel. So the first thing you're going to notice while I'm unscrewing it, because it's going to get a bit noisy, scrapey metal, you're going to hear the pressure seal give way. So remove that from there. It's going to be a long old screw getting it out of there. And do bear in mind, this is a pre-populated model, this one, but you can get the device with no hard drives inside there. But if you do that, it doesn't include the data recovery services. But once again, that's going to lead on to something I want to talk about later on that I'm less keen about on this device. For the most part, I genuinely like this. I've tested and tried to destroy these devices in the past, and they've always left me impressed. But there's just one little thing about that data recovery and the data storage that I'm less keen on, and it's more of a personal issue than it is to do with the brand, because I think most users are never even going to think about that, to be honest. What you want is rigorously protected data there. So let's get that screw off there, off the front. Put that down there, and now we can remove that front panel. And already that front panel feels like it weighs as much as the DS220 Plus on its own. It has their own patented and developed protection here, and this is pretty much why this system will survive. It can withstand tremendous heat while remaining cool, and at the same time allow that protection. It will expand and crack as it endures and during the cooling process there. So once this has gone through a disaster situation once, it's worth highlighting that it will compromise it moving forward. You can't just pop it back on the table and continue working with it. But if we move that down there, we can remove the internal panel where our drives are. Once again, stay tuned for hearing that pressure noise. So let's remove that from there. Hear that? That was, I might have overplayed it there. It was just a psst, like opening a nice can of pop on a sunny day. So if we remove that panel from there, are we there? No, we're not there yet. And this will reveal our two storage bays. Again, you may have noticed up to this point that I've not mentioned which drives are inside there, and there's two reasons for that. One, because it's not really published anywhere online outside of reviews which drives are featured inside this system. But the other reason I want to talk about it is I have a strong suspicion which drives are used inside, which adds to the point I'm going to make in just a moment. So inside there, we've now got to remove another couple of seals, because as you can see from inside there, the drives are being held kind of suspended from all sides, and that's another effort by ioSafe to make sure these drives are not going to be easily moved. So again, we remove our last screw there. I apologise for doing this so close to the mic. Get that out of there. We can remove our next screw and the drive comes out. Now, as you can see there, they're running WD drives there. These are WD Red Plus, so these aren't utilising any of their SMR stuff that we talked about before. And frankly, I'm very, very surprised that they're WD Reds there, because I was getting all ready to complain about this system. Because alongside this system arriving both pre-populated and empty, it's worth highlighting that the price tag for some of the drives in this system, if you get the device populated, are frankly a little bit much. So for example, this is the 4TB model. It's got two 4TB drives inside there, but the unpopulated model arrives at $930 if you buy it from their site. If you get the system that's got a couple of 4TB drives inside, it works out, and each of these drives costs $358 each for a 4TB WD Red Plus, which is several times what this costs on its own. Now, originally, I was going to assume, luckily I didn't, that it would have Seagate Iron Wolves inside. The reason being that Seagate Iron Wolves arrive with data recovery services on board. WD don't, however, but if you buy this system pre-populated, you get the data recovery included. You get 2 years of data recovery services included with the system, and you can extend that to 5 years, or if you're using one of the models that has SSDs inside, then that's inclusive anyway. So again, I'm pleased that they're offering those data recovery services and not just relying on the brand to supply them. I'm also quite pleased that it's utilising WD Red Pros, because although I do like Seagate Iron Wolves, it has to be said that in terms of sustained performance at the 4TB level, the WD Red Plus does win overall. It would have been very easy for this brand to go for a less impressive drive, to go for a lower performance drive, or going for the drive where they could have taken advantage of the brand's own data recovery services. And the fact they didn't do that for me is a definite plus. Now, inside you can make out right the way back there, if I remove my hand, at the back a small SATA port there, and that whole surrounding there of that white mesh, that white kind of extensive hard foam there. Now again, this is what protects this system and keeps the moisture surrounding the device so it can survive those intense heat. It's all built inside there with the system. Now, when we do our destruction tests on this, what we're going to be mainly looking at is how well the system survives shock damage. Because although we are going to toast it like we did when we put the previous 5-bait on a barbecue, and we are going to suspend it in water, maybe even freeze it as well, I want to see how well this survives destruction. Because even though it's really important that you know that ioSafe do not certify this device for destruction, I know that fire safety and water safety against these disaster situations aren't quite enough. And I would love to see how well this is going to survive against destruction. And frankly, given the legacy of the device we've tested up to this point, I'm quite confident that it's going to live through it. But this has been my hardware review of this, the ioSafe 220 Plus. Things I like the build quality, I like the assurances. I certainly love that they're using the WD Red drives inside there rather than being overly reliant on the Iron Wolves and their own recovery services. I like the build quality. I like the fact they've ascertained and included everything that the 220 includes there. What am I less keen on? I wish they'd gone for something a bit more beefy, like a 720 Plus or something, or maybe even upgraded that CPU, but I can understand that Synology probably would have conflicted with them on that. And another thing I don't like, the pricing strategy. Although the £930 price of this is more than $930 price tag is more than $600 more than you can get this device for. That I'm cool with. What I'm not cool with is the price of the hard drives, and the idea that I would pay $358 for a drive I can get for under $100. That data recovery is good, but is it $200 or so good? You tell me. You could go for this device, get your own drives inside, and still be protected from disaster recovery, and still go for drives that have data recovery services built into them. But that's really up to you. But for the most part, I really like this. So do stay tuned for the destruction tests as we move forward. Either me and Eddie are going to come up with some horrendous stuff, or hopefully you guys will be able to help us out. Maybe you're a builder and you've got some tools knocking around that we can take advantage of and you're based in the UK. Head to the comments and let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, click like. If you want to learn more or be notified when we go through the destruction tests, click subscribe. Visit the links in the description to the review and further guides. And other than that, I will see you next time.